face. There we go. And Tim is at a meeting with the secretary. He'll join us late. But as you know, we on the Historical Commission have been frustrated to no end about the fact that we haven't had any funding in the last 2 years. And I think, as I said at the last meeting I attended, that we are in danger of not getting them funded again. And part of our responsibility is not, our responsibility includes not just ranking, not just vetting. It also includes making sure that doing what we can to get the funding. And I know that we have, some of us has various lobbying restrictions, and we just will go by them. But on the other hand, what I've been the secretary's been wringing her hands with me, and so is Tim, and so have I. And we came up with this idea back in November. And because of the sunshine laws, I mean, more like October, the sunshine laws, I couldn't talk to you about it. And so we worked it out. And when about a month ago, I sent you a heads up on what was going on. What date was it? It was the 5th of, about a month ago, 15th of November. And so what to do? So this plan has, it's more like a strategy, has evolved into something that I want your input on, and I want to make sure you understand what it's a little bit different for the Historical Commission to do these sorts of things, but I think we're in pretty troubling times. The first important thing to note is that the state has more money than it anticipated having, period. In October, the tax that was went into the state coffers was over $400 million more than they planned on. Florida has been open for business, and it shows in the tax revenues. So we have a lot of one-time money, plus the COVID money that's come in, and FEMA money that's come into the state. There's a lot of one-time money around. That also happened last year, and they gave it to everybody but us, but our special category grants. And I think silence is deadly. So the idea came, and I think we brought it up. I think Kathleen, you and I talked about it a little bit at the meeting a couple months ago, is that there are a lot of organizations in the state whose members and institutions benefit from special category grants. The Historic Preservation Community. There are 6 organizations, and I gave you a list of them. You know what they are. They're the trusts, the Anthropological Society, the museums, the Archaeology Network, Historical Society, and the Florida Archaeological Council. And so since all of us have, all of these organizations have a lot of, it's important to them, these special category grants, I thought maybe the secretary, Tim, and I thought that we could perhaps activate their members to lobby locally their own representatives to the state, and start have kind of a grassroots movement. Visit their members when they're at home, regular members, regular citizens, getting an appointment with their representatives and senator, and saying, look, this is what the special category grants on, re-educate them about special category grants, show them a map like, I've got it here, like this, that shows where the category grants that we approved are throughout the state. And they cover, from Key West to Pensacola. And but anyway, educate them, give them some information, and ask them for their support this year. And so I called together the presidents, and a lot of them have CEOs, a staff, their head staff member, and we met a couple weeks ago, and I laid this out for them. and Secretary and Tim were both in the meeting the whole time. And I said, you know, it seems to me that this has a chance of working. Grassroots is very powerful way to get something accomplished. The members need to be, most of them need to be reelected. They care what their constituents are concerned about and also what's going on in their districts. So I asked them if they would sign on to trying to do this, and they did. And now the presidents and CEOs are going to their boards of their organizations, asking for the board support that they have their membership do this. And the Florida Anthropological Society just met, their board just met and approved it. And that's happening before the first of the year. And so in the meantime, what we as a commission that really has the special category grants in our lap and as our responsibility, what we need to do is to support them in any way we can. And I don't know how many ways we can, but let me tell you the sort of the assignments that the presidents agreed to. As we know, Melinda Horton and Melissa Wiley, Horton from museums, Melissa from the Florida Trust, they are closest to the political scene in Tallahassee. They're used to lobbying. They know how to deal with members, especially Melinda. And they are putting together contact information for the legislatures, for their members, instructions on how to, they're making a packet of information that the members of these organizations take with them. Number one, to educate themselves, and number two, to educate their members. And they're putting that together. The second thing is the DHR staff, Angie and Sarah, are making a map. I just did this myself, but making a map of special category grants where they have been in the last 10 years of funding. And also a list, the trust is putting together sort of the version of what used to be called the Pink Book, which is really a summary of a brief summary of every special category grant, a picture of the property, a paragraph about why it's important and what they plan to be done, and then a list of the our ranked list of funding. And so Melinda and the DHR staff and Melinda and Melissa are putting that together. And also, well, that's what they're doing. So those two things are going on now while their boards are being requested for their support. So hopefully in the first of the year, when the session starts, we can disseminate that information out electronically so that the members can print it out and then begin to make appointments with their state representatives and senators when they're at home. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what has been going on. And what I'd like to know is from you all, number one, is it okay with you? Number two, what do you think that we can do to help this, the members and the organizations? I look at the commission as a sort of coordinating organization. But for example, Kathleen, you've got a great experience in the legislature and dealing with special category grants. And one of the things I thought you might do is to help kind of get in touch with Melinda and see what you can do to help her. I know you know Melinda forever.
I already have that to ask you if I could help the Florida Trust part, because here's why I really want the comeback of the Pink Book to be a physical thing that the organizations can actually print out. And we mentioned this briefly at the meeting. Right. And somebody said, well, yeah, we still kind of do that. It's an online thing. No, this has to be something that gets in their inbox and is a PDF document that they can physically print out. And on top of and the physical pink book, and I actually produced those when I used to work at DHR.
Yeah, right.
And they were pink, but to me, it's such an important piece of getting the point across to the legislators. And not only that, I feel like as part of our offerings to these organizations of, not just like the map and the write-up of the projects and the distribution around the state, but we should also do a like a one-page cheat sheet of what do you say to your legislator?
That's right. Talking
And,
points.
well, talking points, but some of these people have never done this before in their lives.
That's very true.
So it always amazed me when we did the Florida Trust Advocacy Days.
Was it mandatory? Gramercy?
When we did the Florida Trust Advocacy Days in Tallahassee, the people that would attend that event, half of what we were doing there was teaching them,
Right.
Okay, this is what you got to do. You call and make your appointment, and then you go and you meet with them and you tell them XYZ.
Right.
So
That's
I think that's a huge part of it too. So I am happy to get with the Florida Trust staff and Melissa and help them in that effort.
Right. And I think that your expertise with doing the Pink Book, the trust, coordinating the lobbying effort in the Capitol at the time is your strength. I think Melinda is really good with what do you say to a state representative? And if you could kind of make sure they're on target, make sure, just sort of help them. And I think that would really, another thing you mentioned one time, Kathleen, was identifying, now every senator and representative is important, but who are the key people? Some people live in the district of the chairman of appropriations. Some people live in of both the Senate and the House. Who are the key members that really need to buy into this? And then focus, make sure that whoever goes and visits them sings the same song.
Yeah, and not only just identifying the people who are on key committees, but also when we have that list of ranks, the ranking list,
Right.
Those projects that are sort of closer to the bottom of the list,
Right.
they need to understand, and they need to be able to then say to their legislator, look, this is where we are, and this is the amount that has to get funded for us to hit this list. So sometimes you can leverage the people at the lower end of the list.
Absolutely. Right. They got to fund the whole list almost to get down to their number 63 or whatever. Right. And I think that point has been lost, as they've dribbled funding out to us for a few years and then just cut it off. That's good. So if you would really focus on that, you're in the mix, you're current, you and Melinda and Melissa are, just the right people to put that in, but make a packet for them that has that information, identify which of their members, where the key legislators are that need to be contacted, and give that group or those members that are going to go visit them some extra special. You might have a Zoom meeting to prep of members that are willing to go to visit their legislators. Yeah, good. Now, are there any other ideas of how we can help this effort? Grassroots organizations that most of us belong to.
Well, this is Bill Clegg. I have to be careful because my client is very involved in the politics of the state, and I don't know how many others on the commission have that same, but I do think it's worthwhile for us to make calls to those people that we know are in the legislature or have influence over people in the legislature that might be able to help. And I'm certainly prepared to do that. I'll need to clear it with my client first. So I don't want to commit to the rest of you. I'm going to do that without, getting the okay, but I'm reasonably sure I will. And, I'll put in some calls, and if they're okay with it, I'll talk directly to our legislative delegation and also to some people that work with them quite a bit. I think that's important, just to be on the radar.
Right. I think part of the problem, Bill, is that we are off the radar.
Yeah.
Back in the good old days, we all used to lobby for this. We had networks we activated at every year, the members of the Historical Commission, and that just has gone by the wayside in the last few years, and we just need to do that. I'm not asking people, any of us, to lobby, but if you want to, you can. It's like part of our responsibility, but each of us has different has a different political world that we live in. But
Sure.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
Okay. And give us feedback. I think one thing when I meet again with the presidents, I will ask for updates sometime in January, but it's only a 2-month session, so we don't have a lot of time. Matt, you want to say something?
Can
Yes,
you hear
ma'am.
me?
I think for me, I kind of need a little bit of a little background on from where the agency, or not the agency, but the department, where they came from this. So I'd like to know what was the department's legislative budget request for this fiscal year. What did they submit to the governor's office? Did the governor pick it up in his recommended budget? And if he didn't, why didn't he? Because, at the end of the day, we still got to get his approval. So if the department submitted a request and the governor didn't pick it up in his budget, then there's a hurdle right there that will be at the back door of anything we do as to why he didn't pick it up. Right. So I'd like to know what the department asked for, and if the governor picked it up, and if so, is he going to support it? And if not, why is he against it? Because that's a fundamental question in this entire process.
Right.
Because while the governor's budget is obviously just a recommended budget, obviously, as you well know, at the end of the day, he's still got veto power, right? So if for some reason he has some fundamental issue with this, then that puts us in a bad spot. So I think from my standpoint, I'll help however I can. Don't misunderstand me.
I get it.
I'm sitting here a block from the Capitol. I could walk over there right now. I mean, that's not a question, but I'd like to know what I'm kind of getting into, So if the department submitted a request for, I don't know, $15 million or whatever the number is, I'd like to know that number, right? And if the governor picked up that number, great. If he didn't, where are we at, right? And so, because the legislature, sometimes they like to go exactly with the governor and support him where he can, and sometimes, they'll buck the governor, but they got to have a good reason to be able to buck the governor and get past that. So I just kind of like to know some of that background information for me, because I know, if I sat down and talked with, Representative Trumbull or something, he's bound to ask me, hey, the governor put it in his budget, or what was the request from the department? Those are kind of fundamental things I would feel bad by not knowing, in one of those opportunities. So, but I'm happy to use a fairly significant amount of connections to certainly weigh in on this. I'm happy to do that. I'm more than happy to do that. So.
Good. Angela, do you know the answer to Matt's question about now that what happens to the list and the request for funding? What's the process?
Yes and no. I don't know the exact process because I've never been intimately involved in it, but I can say that the special category list is not usually included within our legislative budget request. It is submitted after all of what we call the grant book that has all of the departmental grants lists in it for every division, not just ours. I know our legislative affairs director and people submit that. I'm not sure who they submitted to, so I apologize for that because I'm not intimately involved in that side of it things. But the governor's budget usually doesn't include special category. because we don't include that list within our LBR submitted earlier in the summer. What it does include is currently the small matching ranked list is funded fully in the governor's budget. But the amount that will be requested from the legislature for funding for special category is 21 million and a little bit above 21 million, like 21.5 million, which would be 77 projects.
Well, Tim, thank you, Angie. Tim, when he joins us, will add some more details, but I agree with you, Matt. One thing that we as commissioners need to be educated on is what is the process? Like, I know the grants aren't part of the division's budget. However, I also know, like Angie just said, that the small grant matching grants are. And so, Kathleen, are you more informed in this?
I would imagine that the amount we would be focusing on would be what covers the list of special category grants. That's kind of our key focus at the moment, right? To make sure the special category grants get funded again, at least at some level.
Mm-hmm.
And I know 21 million sounds like really crazy a lot, especially when we haven't been funded in 2.5 years. But I mean, I remember the years when we were at 12, 14 million. We were getting funded. And then some years it was, back down to 3 or 4 million. So it really can fluctuate. So as I move forward, I'm really focusing on the amount of money that would cover the list of special category grants. And I would, as part of that outreach and educational process, I would, remind people that part of the reason this list is so obnoxiously long this year is because it's 2 years of not getting funded, and they're all having to come back and reapply. So,
well, I think we have to think about, and not now, being a little bit more rigorous in our ranking and scoring, because the list is just, it can't be this big. It's too big of an ask. And so we need to.
But do you want to try to agree on like what we would target? Because I think if there's a concerted effort of what the target is, it's better than having asks all over the place at all different.
Well, we could do top 10, top 20, something like that. And that brings it down into probably less than 10 million. I don't know. Sarah, you're on here. What do you think about this? And do you know more about the process?
I do not know more about the process. Angie definitely knows the more between the two of us.
Sure.
I'm not really involved in the special category grants too much.
Okay. All right, so we could, as a commission, emphasize the top 20 or so. What do you all think about that? But that kind of doesn't do service to the others that we have ranked up high.
Could I throw something else out here?
Sure.
Just listening to Angie's response, I think a fundamental flaw in the fly in the ointment, if you will, every agency submits their LBRs. They go through a process. The governor either includes them or doesn't include them in their budget and whatnot. If the grant funding that we're requesting is coming in after the LBR process, it inherently is at a disadvantage. Okay. My thought would be, why doesn't the Department of State put in a placeholder LBR every year for a recurring appropriation rather than for non-recurring dollars, and say, hey, every year we anticipate there being 15 million in recurring need for funding for special category projects, right? So that way you're not out of the mix up front. They can either afford to do 15 million recurring, or they can't, but at least you know, and then you can go after non-recurring money that way, right? But add this to the base budget of what the state of Florida just does, right? If we truly believe that cultural resources and historic properties are important in Florida, then dadgummit, put your money where your mouth is, right? And put it into the base budget and just make it a thing, right? And by doing that, you know, the following year we can say, well, okay, submit your requests. We're going to have $15 million to use. And now that changes the way you rank things, right? Now that
Yes.
changes your perspective on things a little bit, right?
Right.
And now you can talk about your ranking process, you know, down the road, but let's advocate for a consistent year-end block of money that just goes, you know, and make sure that it's a priority of the state of Florida. I mean, we fund all kinds of stuff in the base budget. Some of it is absolutely useless, for God's sakes.
Right.
This is not. And so, you know, and unfortunately, I know a little bit about some of that useless crap. So I say that to say that I think we need to, I absolutely agree that we need to advocate and do all that stuff. I'm not saying that. I'm thinking we need to come at it from a different level, from a true base level of saying, look, what is a priority of the state of Florida? If this is a priority, then let's fund it. And then let's advocate for that funding. And then we figure out how we rank based on that funding. But I think it just becomes something that should be a matter of course every year, just in the budget. And if there's years where there's additional funds, then maybe we try and advocate to raise that line item a little bit. You know, I mean, it's no different than how we handle cancer research dollars or Alzheimer's research dollars in the state of Florida. We have base amounts of money. People submit for projects and proposals. And if the legislature is able to appropriate some additional funds in a given year to the King, Coley, or more funds, that they do that. But there's a base amount because it's determined that it's a priority of the state of Florida. So.
Well, you know, we've got two responses, Matt. I think it's a good idea. The secretary is really supportive of special category grants. She gets it. She's also really miffed and upset about the lack of funding for the last several years since she's been in office. And she probably, she and Tim, but she would need to do that. I think she would certainly consider it. From what I know.
It wouldn't be us. It would have to be her. And
oh yeah,
you know, and look, my area of appropriations when I was in the legislature was healthcare. I wrote the healthcare budget for 6 years. Okay, so there may be, just like there's in healthcare, there is a gazillion quirky things that agencies have to work through. And I don't know the Department of State, so I'm certainly not trying to throw them under the bus. Please don't misunderstand me. And if there's some statutory thing that prevents them from doing that, okay, fine. Maybe we ought to try and fix that too, you know, but I just think it's a way that we could approach it. And especially if we have a supportive secretary, if we've got a supportive secretary of this, that she certainly seems to be, man, this seems like a golden opportunity. We've got a supportive secretary. We've got a legislature that's flush with money. We've got a commission that is like-minded, that wants to advocate to move forward. I mean, I think these pieces of the puzzle come together, you know, pretty well in that particular case. I have to be honest, I'd also be curious to hear from John Browning, because John, having sat on a number of different commissions and, you know, been very close to many governors along the way, I'd love to hear his thoughts on this process as well. If I don't mean to put you on the spot, John.
No. What do you think, John?
Hello.
Turn unmute.
I agree totally with him. Comes to mind, Matt, that in the next 2 days, most of us, or a lot of us, will be at the mansion with the governor and with all the leaders of the House and Senate. Wouldn't hurt to let them know in a nice way, interested in this. They, you know, most of them have it on their radar at all. We can at least begin the process by putting it in their mind. And I think it helped personally. I don't know the governor. I don't think he would be the person, but we are going to have Senate President and Speaker, and you're going to have Jay's going to be there. You're going to have both appropriations chairs and the vice chairs. and we'll be talking to them. And so I'd be glad to advocate, Matt, and I'm sure I'll see you there for the next 2 days. He's going to have four parties at the mansion. We should be able to cover all of those. And I think that's start too. You do it from both ends every day.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
John, I wish I
Hello?
could tell you I'm going to be at the mansion. However, a funny thing happens after you leave office after a period of time. You don't always get all those invites anymore. So I drive by the mansion and I can wave at you if you want, or we can get a drink afterwards, but I won't be there, my friend.
We can take care of that after I get off the phone.
There you go.
I just want to see you advocating when you're there. Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
I will call Nicole when I get off.
Hey, Judy,
Yes,
I've got a couple of points I'd like to make if
please,
if I
Rick.
can.
Yes.
So a couple, first of all, I don't think you should ask so kindly. I think you should really ask everybody to make every effort to lobby the hell out of everybody. All right. I mean, this is ridiculous. This has happened before with the zero. I've been on the selection committee and on the commission for 13, this is my 13th year, my third or
Right.
fourth governor. I can't remember. I remember when Rick Scott got elected, the very first week we went to Tallahassee. He had no idea about the economic impact of historic preservation. At that time, we had the fresh report from the University of Florida and the Florida Trust indicating and showing proof of that economic impact. And it boils down to that. It's all about the economic impact. We have to go back the last 10 years, and maybe this is some more work for Tim, but you know, he's got to help too. Go look at all the monies that we've actually distributed over the last 10 years and what kind of an impact has that money had creating other monies and other jobs through historic preservation, right? So if we've given, let's say we've given 50 million over the last 10 years, did that create 150 million or $250 million worth of work, you know, so that they can see the real numbers, the economic impact. So we got to get our staff to help us there. We have a new secretary, Secretary Lee. She came to the Florida Trust Awards. She's very friendly to historic preservation. We need to lobby her. We need to work with her so she can get us to the governor. The Florida Trust on January 27th has Florida Trust Legislative Day in Tallahassee. All of us need to be there. All of us need to help the Florida Trust get the word out. I mean, that's the way to get to the legislators locally, you know, like you said earlier in the meeting, get the names and phone numbers of the local people to each one of the commissioners so that each one of us can then go hit on 2, 3, or 4 people and talk to them one-on-one, and then hopefully again during Tallahassee days. And lastly, I want to mention, like Kathleen said, the Pink Book, not just a PDF, but an actual hard copy of the Pink Book, you know? That's how you get people's attention. So when you see these folks, whether in Tallahassee or back home, you can give them the damn book and say to them, you need to fund these projects, you know, you need to give us enough money, you know, every year. I love the idea of making it a permanent line item. Why isn't it a permanent line item? Why are we funding, I don't know, you know, roads and so many other things in the state, and we're not funding preservation. Preservation is not a Democratic thing or Republican thing or independent thing. It works at all levels. I've experienced that now sitting on the ACHP in Washington. You know, we have people, we gave the awards yesterday on our quarterly meeting, and everybody and their mother from Wisconsin was taking credit for a restoration job, you know, senators and so forth. That's what they like to do. They like to take credit for these projects. So we really need a strong marketing campaign. I don't know how we're going to do it. Judy, I applaud you for setting up this meeting, but someone needs to grab this bull by the horn and run with it. And the rest of us need to jump in and help you out with this.
Mhm. Well, I'm willing to grab the bull by the horn, and I think you're right. You know, one of the things that the commission needs to, I want to say 2 points. Number one is when we were steadily funded back in the early 2000s and say 2000 to 2007, before the recession, we all lobbied, and there was usually though a number that we were given as a commission. Well, it looks like we'll set aside about $6 million next year, or somehow that number was generated. And we ranked the applications, kept that in mind when we were scoring. And then as we ranked them, we would rank it down to that number and draw a line and say, those are the ones that we are going to fund. I know that we're going to push for funding. And the others, well, come back next year. So that was helpful. You can't, we always have 50 to 80 applications. And you, even though they're deserving, some are more deserving than others. I think that having that general number, Matt, whether it is in a secretary's budget that goes to the department budget that goes to the governor or not, we should ask her, I guess, what's the best number that we can expect to get? Now, I know these are weird economic times. Florida has more money, I think, than we anticipated. We're coming out of this COVID thing pretty well, better than expected. So I think maybe we can ask the secretary, what's her comfort number that we ask for, instead of asking for 21 million. It's been done before, so we could do it again. And the second thing is lobbying of by the commission. I think that's important, that we need to do that and activate our networks. We haven't done it. Well, I'll speak for myself. I haven't done it since I've been on the commission for the last few years. But of course, I'm not president of a university anymore. I'm not running great big archaeological grants and contracts. But that's just, it's just different right now. So anyway, I'm glad to hear your support and that you're for it. Any other ideas that that you can come up with? I've got every commissioner needs to lobby like hell. We need the pink book in hard copy. We can do that. I think I'll speak with the secretary about it and ask maybe her to attend our next meeting, Matt, and see how it really helps us to have a number and to keep that in mind when we're doing our ranking. And John, thank you for your insiders help on the inside at the top. That will help the secretary, but it also certainly will help us in the governor's office. What I'm hoping the secretary can do is, if we can get them funded, to keep it from Governor DeSantis's veto pen.
Judy, I had one other thought. We as a commission are a limited number of people. So obviously the more we can leverage in other organizations to also help us with the effort would be far more powerful than just us. So, all the municipalities and the counties, they have lobbying teams that put together a list of kind of key items that they want to make sure get across when they're doing their lobbying efforts at the Capitol. And I don't know how, or if there was a way for us to put bugs in their ears about getting preservation on. I know when I was at Miami-Dade County as the historic preservation chief, I made sure that our Miami-Dade County lobbying team, would talk about historic preservation. That was always on their list, but I was an internal employee for them. Right. So I don't know if there's a way we can influence that at all. Also, Florida League of Cities might be a great partner with us. Right. This is definitely one of the kinds of things that they do is advocacy and lobbying, and certainly they could easily be educated if they don't already understand, but I'm sure that they do as to how historic preservation affects the very communities they represent. Mm-hmm. So you know, so thinking about other organizations that like Florida League of Cities that maybe aren't preservation or museum centered, that already have that network base of people to work from, but would still be very effective partners for us.
I was thinking about that too, Kathleen. And years ago with the Florida Trust, with Melissa and with John Reagan from St. Augustine, we were going to work on a PowerPoint tour to give to the Florida League of Cities and Counties, and it didn't grab traction. So maybe we reach out to the Florida Trust again. I'm more than willing to help with that again. And John will be excellent because he comes from the practice of city government, right? Being a city manager in a historic city like St. Augustine. So if you want to run that up the pole with Melissa, and if she wants to try to restart that, I'm all for that.
Good. Thank you, Rick. I hadn't even thought about that. That's a great idea. Those people lobby for their cities and counties all the time.
Yep.
And they, you know, I'm sure every city and county that has a grant in its region and close by would love to see that grant and would love to see the dollars come in and be matched and provide not just jobs, but tourism. A lot of these things are for grants are for museums and public sites. So that's a great idea. Rick and Kathleen, if you would follow that rabbit down the hole and see what we can do, and what I know that Tim and the secretary will definitely support it. Good.
And
That's
Judy,
neat.
if I could, this is an idea that is not for this year, but moving forward.
Yeah.
You know, each individual county, and this kind of goes to what we were talking about, or what Kathleen brought up about the cities and the counties. Each individual county has a legislative delegation hearing day. And that day, I mean, I used to chair my delegation down in Collier County and in Hendry County. And, you know, you would get your municipalities and their county
we've got 'em
government to
here.
come forward and, you know,
Yeah.
tell you what's going on, of course. But then you get a whole bunch of other folks that were with organizations that may not be as mighty as a county, or might have a vested interest in it, but, you know, don't have a lobbying team or whatever. And I always found as a legislator that to be tremendously valuable. And I had my staff put together a book for all my delegation members, and I'd take it to Tallahassee with me. And that way I could look, as we were going through budget deliberations, I go, hey, what happened to these guys? Where are we at with these guys? What can we do here? And sometimes that's a very valuable meeting, because you can corner, for lack of a better term, you can corner a legislator that you might be having trouble getting a meeting with, or maybe somebody that's in leadership that normally is real hard to get a meeting with.
Yeah.
You well know how the challenges of that go.
Right.
The reality is, you know, hey, at a Hendry County delegation meeting, I was able to spend 20 minutes with the incoming Senate president. Okay, that doesn't normally happen, right? And so those might be opportunities as we put together a strategy after this session and kind of think long-term, what will the commission and the department look like moving forward to advocate for these issues? That might be some of our target work, is to say, okay, the Senate president, the speaker, the incoming Senate president, the appropriations chairs, where are their districts? Where are their counties?
Districts?
What's going
Right.
on in those counties? Is one of us close? Is there a project in that community that's looking for funding? How can we facilitate that one-on-one connection that brings it back home to them, to make them advocate because it's the right thing to do? Hey, I'd love to see, you know, the refuge house in Martin County get money. Why? Because that's in my backyard and that's a big thing for our community, and blah, blah, blah. And if you make it personal, man, they'll jump all over it. But it's a good vehicle to be able to see people one-on-one that otherwise it's hard to do sometimes.
You're right. And they're not well attended usually, you know?
No, I mean, it's usually just a dozen people or so that show up, and they we used to block a huge amount of time.
Yeah,
and it's
hours.
televised, right? Hours, for Pete's sake. And sometimes you blow through the agenda fairly quickly, but you know what? Usually if there's a dozen people there, you know, chair says, take as long as you need to share your point, right? And all of a sudden now you've got a captive audience of maybe the most influential person in the legislature with their other members of the delegation. Man, it's just that's awesome, right? And both sides of the aisle are there. It's open to everybody. I mean, it's
Oh,
a
yeah.
great way of doing it to me. So anyway,
Yeah, I used to do it all the time. And I forget what I was really lobbying for. You know, mostly it was for universities to fund universities, quit
Sure.
cutting their budget, yada, yada. But they listen and they're
Absolutely.
usually quite bored and have a lot of time blocked out and their aides are there usually.
yep.
Mhm.
That's the other big thing is you also get staff there, and all of a sudden, in session, staff comes up and says, hey, do you remember at the delegation meeting, do you remember Judy came up here and talked to you about such and such? And all of a sudden you're like, oh crap, yes, I do. We'll figure it out, right? And
Right.
sometimes it's just there's too many things floating around their heads and they need little reminders. But seeing somebody local talk to them in a local setting about a local issue becomes a very powerful thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Not only that, but when you talk to them and then you can say, remember when we did the courthouse in downtown and the impact that's had in our town for
Mhm.
the last 10 years, you make it local, and it always, preservation is always at the local level. So we really need to get to these people one-on-one.
Yep. Yeah, and it's not us as a commission. What we need to do is to make sure as a commission that the right people get to the right delegations and say, push the right things.
Right. Exactly right.
I mean, I'm not going to go to Bay County's, delegation meeting. I got no business there. I'm not going to go to anybody but Escambia County where I live and work and vote. And yeah, that's a great idea. All right. Well, you're right. That's for next year, but I
Right.
do
Oh yeah.
think
No, all the
it
delegation
runs-
meetings are done. So yeah.
it runs right along the same track of that we as a commission need to get wrap our hands around getting these grants funded. I think number one, coming up with, and we might need to come up with a number from the secretary today. I don't mean today, but I mean for this session. And also educating our delegations that are people that are in the right leadership delegations. Yeah. So
And
that's good.
I have one question. So at the beginning of this
Yeah.
conversation, you brought up a number of different organizations, about a half a dozen of them, the
Right.
Florida Trust, so forth. I'm not affiliated with any of those organizations. Okay.
Right.
Because I'm not an archaeologist. I'm not that's not what I do. Right.
Right.
But Kathleen brought up the fact that, sometimes people don't know how to lobby. They don't know how
Oh,
to
yeah.
interact with people because they've never been to the Capitol or they've never had a meeting with a legislator before, right? I mean, they've just never
Right.
done that. And what I would say is, if those groups are, they have an annual conference or whatever, and they've put together
Yep.
their legislative team or their policy team or whatever it is, maybe we ought to think about, and I'd offer myself up as the guinea pig, to teach them how to lobby, do a little mock session at their annual conference or something so that you can, feel comfortable. How do you have a conversation with a legislator about a topic, right? And so, I could come at it from the legislative perspective. I mean, Judy, you could come at it from being the person asking, right? I mean, you
Yeah,
could do a little
yeah.
mock thing to allow people to go, oh yeah, you know what? I can do that. That's not
Right.
so intimidating, and I just throw that out there as an idea because it is intimidating for people to do that. I remember the first time I talked to my state representative, I was like, and
Yeah.
then lo and behold, I became one, which is even weirder. But it just seems like it could be another tool in the toolbox. And all of this is about tools in the toolbox and coming up with a rock solid plan. And I commend you for putting this together because I think it's certainly well needed. But
Oh,
yeah.
I do too. And each one of those organizations, I'm looking at the list now, has an annual conference. They're usually in the fall or the spring, and we certainly there's the Florida Trust is on the Florida Anthropological Society. I have a member on the commission, if no one else me. FAM, I don't think anybody on the commission is, but we've got Melinda Horton, who is very seasoned, who would certainly run a session like that at their conference. The Historical Society, they aren't real savvy politically, and I don't mean that in too negative, but they aren't in the political world too much. They would need more help than anybody, and a group of us could go and first of all ask to get on their events. And the Archaeological Council, those are professional. I'd have to think that might not be worth it. They're pretty loose. They support it, but they're pretty loose. So yeah, I think that's a good idea. And
I love that idea.
mhm.
I think especially for organizations like the Florida Trust and Florida Main Street, that they're now doing a co-conference together. I mean, these are all, especially the organizations that see the benefit, that really are, involved in the historic preservation and the advocacy side of it. I love the idea, Matt, of every year
Every year.
have
Yeah.
that as one of the sessions at the conference, because they're always looking for session topics anyway. And you always have new people coming to the conference. So what a fantastic idea. And thank you for offering to volunteer your services for that.
Yeah,
Happy to do it.
yeah. Well,
Not only that, but the conference has been merged with the Florida Main Street, and it's now every summer. So you'll be hitting 2 statewide groups. It's a great idea.
good. Well, I'm gonna put that on our agenda at the next meeting, and we'll thrash it out and come up with a plan, because the meetings are all set for this year, but they start again in the fall. And the fall is and then they go through the spring. Anyway, we'll make a plan. Good idea, Matt. Thank you.
Even a blind squirrel finds an acorn now and then.
Blind hogs, right? John, how are you with all this? You like this?
Sounds great.
Okay. That's good. Well, I think we can call this, any other topics? Any other topics?
Anytime you want to send me invites to parties, I'd be happy to swing by Tallahassee and join you.
Yeah, but you're not allowed in Tallahassee with that hat. That's why I put
Oh.
up the background I did.
That is bad.
Oh,
bad,
no.
Kathleen.
Yeah, we have very strict rules up here about things like that. And, don't
That's
misunderstand me. I love gator, but just lightly battered and deep fried with a little remoulade sauce. So
All right.
Now,
Very
what
good.
building do you?
I was fresh out of Florida from grad school, and my first job was at the Division of Historical Resources, and my apartment was on College Avenue, right in the middle of a bunch of fraternities. And I had all these gator stickers on my car and a gator license plate, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to go very, very badly. But they were very, very kind to me. Everybody. Tallahassee was great. I've lived there twice, and I really enjoy Tallahassee.
well, there are a few notable exceptions. You're one. I mean, but
Yeah. All right. Well, good. This has been very informative. I'll write up a couple of notes. I'm sorry, Tim can't make it, but what I will do is I will ask Tim and the secretary if they would like, instead of lobbying for 21 million, is there a number that we should lobby for and draw a line? And I don't know if
One more thing, Judy, of urgency is we have been without a state preservation architect for way too long.
Can you
They
believe
are,
that?
let me ask, I have an architectural firm. They are offering $40,000 to $45,000. I can't get a janitor for $40,000 to $45,000. We have a serious problem. We have people that are non-architects giving architectural advice for the first time in over 30 years. I'm glad none of them are on the line right now, but this is crazy. We have 2 positions. At a minimum, we need a state preservation architect like David Farrell, like Rick, who passed away. We've got to fill that position for next year. If you can add that to your list, that's just
All right.
critical,
Right.
very critical.
So what do you need to do? Make it like
It's
6,000?
It's super critical. I
Yep.
mean, and just to think about the number of projects that used to cross Dave Farrow's desk, and he would be
Right.
chin deep in architectural and I mean, we have serious stuff going on at the state, federal tax credit projects, and things that go on to the federal government that have to be approved by the division. And I am astounded of the salary that they have to work with.
It's
I
ridiculous.
don't, the poor division. Yeah.
Well, maybe what we ought to do is to write a letter. And a formal letter to to Tim and to the secretary,
Yep.
saying that this commission is alarmed and is very concerned. It's a serious problem. And it's just, we know it's a money problem, but we need to have a an architectural preservation historian in the state. It's just too much. And maybe Melissa, you and Rick can begin to think about the points that we'll make. I can give them a heads up and tell them that it's coming, and putting in a writing might help. And we'll copy whoever we need to copy. And they'll
Thank
want to know how much. So,
Yeah, thank you, Judy. Those salaries should be at $75,000, and the director should be more like 85, 90,000. And on a plan B is they can also go out to an RFP and hire an outside historic preservation architect to do the review. What they should not be doing is having non-architects doing architectural review work. That's going to be a huge problem in one of these jobs one of these days.
right. And we need to voice our concern. If we
Yeah.
don't say it, nobody will say it. And we can say it as a commission, we can get it in the public record. That just raises the heat up. What I'll
Yes.
do is tell Tim and Secretary Lee that it's coming and that we're very concerned, and you got to do something.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Thank
don't
you.
know about
Thank
the
you.
director's salary, but I certainly do know about the architectural preservation historian. I agree. You can't have non-architects, just like you can't have non-archaeologists telling, and running and being the quality control and giving advice on projects. It's a recipe for disaster. In your case, the house will fall down. In my case, they'll destroy something that is irreplaceable. So, yeah. I agree.
Very, very true. And already on a project in Stewart, we ran into a big issue in terms of splitting preservation work from architectural work. They told someone down here, oh, you need two architects, one to do the building and one to be the historic preservation architect. A total cluster, all right? Just a total cluster. I asked this client, why are you doing this RFP like this? Oh, because the state staff told us to do it this way.
Yeah.
Okay, so clueless.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good, we need to take on these issues. Who else is going to take them on? Nobody. No, nobody.
Nobody.
Good. All right. So I'll put that on our agenda too for our next meeting, but be thinking about the points in the letter that need to be made in the letter with examples, with money, that you can't hire a janitor for that much money that they're offering, and some problems that are already beginning to surface. Yes. Good.
Thank you, Judy.
Oh, my pleasure.
I'm sorry, I have to jump off for another meeting.
Okay, we got to go anyway. Thank you, Kathleen. Anything else anybody needs?
Got to
Bring up.
jump off. We'll see you.
Okay, all right. The meeting
right.
is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Merry
Thank you,
Christmas,
everyone.
all.
Have a good day.
Merry
Bye-bye.
Christmas.
You
Bye
too.
now.